All right, Delaware, let's talk about our Delmarva power bills. We're all hurting from them. I know I'm hurting from them. You probably are too. There's been a lot of information about them put out recently, and I'd like to try to present this in a little bit of an easier package so you don't have to spend hours watching hearings like I did. First, I want to say that if you're being told that the issue is green energy and nothing else, you're being misled by somebody pushing an agenda. What we have is a confluence of issues that came together all at the same time to bring us to where we are today. To start with, we have to understand that Delaware is part of a larger power grid, one of three major power grids in the United States. Delmarva Power is our local grid manager for most of Delaware, but they don't produce power. They buy power wholesale from PJM on a marketplace that the entire Northeast participates in. Over the past many years, the whole country has been going through a change. Many of our generators and power plants have been reaching their end of life. Local advisory boards evaluate these power plants to determine if they're fit to be upgraded or if we have to replace them. This has nothing to do with green energy. It's basically a cost benefit analysis. This happened in Delaware at the Indian River Power Plant, and they determined that because it needed so much money to upgrade and maintain, and because it's an old dirty coal plant, it wasn't worth the investment. It was planned to be shut down a couple years ago, but we actually kept it open for a couple extra years to provide backup power in case of extreme need, which really just means that over the past couple years, it hasn't really been producing any power. It's just been online in case we needed it. While this is happening, PJM has kept track of what the grid needs for baseline power and extreme need to work with local municipalities and companies to replace what needs to be shut down with new forms of power generation. There are a few main options for replacing the old generators with new. The gold standard is nuclear. It's clean and renewable and reliable, and there's also been some really great advancements that have been put out in safety for nuclear. Recently, China unveiled a new nuclear plant that can naturally cool itself, making it meltdown proof. France is at the forefront of nuclear fission, which would be a source of an unlimited source of clean and renewable energy. But these plants are expensive, and the last nuclear plant that came online in the United States was a 30-year project. So nuclear won't help today, and it probably won't help until 2055. Another option would be natural gas, but we're pretty far down the line from where we actually frack for natural gas. So even if the frackers put more gas into those lines, the power plants that are closer to the natural gas source would actually siphon off that extra gas and use it. So it wouldn't make it here. So that's not a really good option for us. There's also hydroelectric, but we don't have enough running water. And we've had some local people talk about hydrogen. And to be honest with you, I don't know much about hydrogen power plants, but you can kind of apply the same idea as nuclear, whereas it's going to take a long time. They take a long time to build and a lot of money. All that money comes from our constituents in Delaware, from our ratepayers. So we have to find ways to pay for these things. So the last couple things that we have would be solar and wind. Again, this isn't solar and wind because of green mandates. It's because solar and wind are our options. Solar and wind do have drawbacks. They need the correct conditions. Solar doesn't work very well on days with overcast or at night. They need battery stations to store the excess power. Wind also needs wind, but they do provide a source of power that we could tap into in Delaware. Now, solar and wind projects have had some bottlenecks. The main one in Delaware being permitting. There's been some solar farms built in Newcastle County, but Kent and Sussex are lagging behind. There's been proposals for offshore wind in Sussex, but the local constituents and representatives have been against it because they don't like the way it looks. The other bottlenecks are issues with global supply chain, which we know has been an issue for a lot of things, delays in trying to get projects and tying in projects, which is an issue with Delmarva, and then manpower and funding, which we know is a bottleneck for everything in the world. Now, these issues have been happening everywhere. Old generators are aging out, and we're trying to replace them with new technology. Enough areas are having enough projects go through for the changes to work out. So this was kind of a tenable situation where overall in the Northeast power grid, there were enough projects that were going through to make up for the loss of the generators. until something unexpected happened. Now, this is the big thing that's really come about recently that's caused a lot of pain. Over the past couple years, the baseline power needs for the Northeast grid and the whole country has grown exponentially, and we couldn't foresee that happening. You may be asking what happened. Well, I can tell you that it wasn't illegal immigrants or a population boom. Um, Everyone didn't raise their thermostat by 10 degrees this winter. It was a little bit cold, but it's nothing that we did. It was data and server farms and AI. And if you look in media right now, you'll see some articles that talk about this. Bitcoin mining, data farms, server farms, and AI, they take a ton of power. And those are all large companies that are doing it. Companies like Amazon have been making large server farms to expand AI, and these farms need a ton of energy. So the thing is, this isn't actually a Delaware problem. There's no server farms or large AI farms going on in Delaware. This is mostly Maryland, it's Virginia, it's other states. Now, those states are on the same Northeast power grid as we are. So if they need more power and we're producing the same amount of power, we have simple marketplace economics. More growth, same supply equals more money. So this past year, you may have seen that Delaware requested and was awarded a raise in rates. They requested the highest increase ever and were awarded about half. This is mostly because the cost of wholesale power grew. Obviously, if there's more demand and the same amount of power to go around, the cost is going to go up. And it didn't grow by a very small margin. It actually grew by a pretty large margin, and PJM was pretty open about that. And that's because they have these large projects going on for data farms, usually with tax breaks and incentives. They're raising the base need of power, but they're not actually helping to offset that need. Now, we, the consumers, are left to pick up the price for that growth. So they get tax breaks, we pay more. Now, there's been some politicians that have suggested making those corporations help by creating their own power or paying to help to upgrade the local infrastructure, but this is mostly reactionary. The damage is already done to us right now. You may also have seen that Delmarva Power has been fined multiple times for failing to purchase enough green energy, which is part of the Delaware green energy mandates. And this is where we start pointing the finger at our Delaware legislature. I actually have some questions about this, and I haven't gotten really good answers in the 8 or so hours worth of hearings I've listened to. I'm kind of curious if why Delmarva is actually failing to get enough green energy. Now, are the mandates reasonable? Can they buy enough and they're just neglecting to do it? Or are they not able to buy enough green energy because we're not upgrading Delaware's infrastructure fast enough? So the last part is, are they just passing those fines on to the ratepayers? Which I believe they probably are. There's been a couple local representatives that have asked the same questions, so hopefully we're getting some answers soon. I don't know. Now, Delaware is also a for-profit company, and I'd like to know if their rate increases reflect the raise in costs or if they're actually providing for higher profit margins, which we would call greedflation. This is pretty normal for for-profit companies to do this. They see that their costs are going up, so instead of raising their rates by the same amount, they raise their rates and then they also raise their margin. Now, this is one of those things where we can look at our Delaware legislature and say, hey, we need some more oversight on this. And that is something that we really need to push for. So what can we do? We know that Delaware has been a net importer of power for pretty much forever. We need more projects to go online to get more power back into the grid. The reality is the grid needs more power now because we've had corporate giants go out and do things that require more power. Now we have to provide it. Now, you may not think that we should provide it, but the grid as a whole needs to be healthy and needs to provide it. We can press our representatives to get those projects going on in Kent and Sussex. I know that there's a lot of pushback about solar and wind. A lot of people don't think that green energy is a good idea, but the reality is that all the states need to put a little bit more power back into the grid to help the system. And we only have two options, solar and wind. And if you go to Atlantic City and see the solar fans out in the bay, it doesn't look that bad. Like, seriously. We can support our representatives that are pushing back to look at options like nuclear, but know that we need fixes for today as well as fixes for tomorrow. So, like, if we're pushing them to look at nuclear and look at hydrogen, just know that that's just not a today fix. That's okay. We need to plan for the future, but we also need to do things now. We can have solar and wind go in this year and next year while we work on nuclear or hydrogen. If we want to place the blame somewhere, the biggest boogeyman in the room is major corporations working on AI. We can point the finger at Amazon or Google and say, hey, you guys need to help this a little bit better, help a little bit more, because what they're doing is lining their pockets, but it's taking money from us. We need better oversight. Like I said, we need to push our legislatures to have better oversight. There are two different ways that they could have evaluated the rate increase. There's already a bill to change which way we do it that provides for more oversight. But we also need them to be able to look at places like Delmarva and make sure they're not just outright ripping us off. So we all kind of think they are, and we need to know. But here's the thing. We can stop pointing the finger at green energy. You might not like it, but that's the only option we have in Delaware.